Every day, you essentially pay your dues by doing the harder thing when it's the right thing to do.
And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to episode number 200, which I feel like I just need like a back of the hand clap. It's like a slow golf clap for everybody. Thank you to all of the listeners. Thank you to all of the people who have been guests. Thank you to all the community who have been kind of tuning in. I didn't say this before, but we are, in a crazy way, we are approaching 1 million downloads on the podcast. When this episode comes out, we'll be right close to 1 million, which is stupid, right? That's ridiculous. So we've had over 4 years about 1 million downloads. And the only reason that is possible and successful is because people listen. So if you're listening to this, you know, when it's coming out or you're here live, just a massive thank you, because without you, again, it doesn't go anywhere. We just keep making episodes and nobody listens. We wouldn't keep doing them. But so thank you to everyone who has listened. Thank you to all the guests who have come on. And thank you to, you know, the people who I think in the community are trying to really do the right thing and make things move forward in the sport. So a podcast like this is a really great way to get a lot of information out. But it really helps us all, because on your own time, you can listen, you can run, you can have questions and feedback. So we do have some questions here. And then we have people that are listening to this after. We have a bunch of people in our Zoom meeting right here that are going to start dropping in questions into the chat as well. So chat people, drop them in if you have questions. And if not, I have a bunch of questions here that we will start doing. So I think the first one here is going to the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Nick Reddick. So Nick, this first question is for you. It says, Nick, in your content and the podcast with Shift about bars, you talk a lot about teaching vision and where to help look during skills. We have a lot of girls struggling with dismounts. They're throwing their head out. They're not tapping. They're scared to hit the bar as season approaches. Can you talk about how you use vision in dismounts and helping them with this fear?
Okay, great question. And just before we get into this, Dave, 1 million downloads is an obscene amount of downloads. I mean, if you think about the end users, like how many people have consumed that and the impact, that is like incredible. So congratulations to you and your team, because that is really truly a phenomenal milestone. And we appreciate being invited to talk about, you know, this content today as well. So thanks so much and congratulations. Okay, this is a really great question. Vision is one of my key principles of teaching bars. So there's 5 bar principles that I refer to. And for those that kind of aren't familiar with my work, I'll just run through what they are. There's sight, vision, basically, flight, there's shape, swing, and extension. They're the kind of 5 most important principles that I'm looking for in bars, and I'm trying to teach all the time. So with vision, what I believe is that in every single skill, whether it's an acrobatic element or bars, beam, it doesn't matter, there's a deliberate place to look. And there's 3 main benefits to that. One of them is going to be the increased level of awareness that the athlete's going to have. So more coordination, more spatial awareness about where they are in space in relation to land and the equipment. There's then going to be the confidence that they develop through being able to see something very deliberately. And the third thing is just the technical benefits. It's going to improve shape, and therefore it's going to improve technique as well. So we've got confidence, awareness, and technique. Now, a dismount on bars, there's what tends to happen here is that let's remove the visual aspect. Dismounts are pretty scary for most gymnasts. In fact, bars becomes quite scary for many gymnasts because the physical and technical balance as kids get older is often tipped the wrong way. You can get away with some acrobatic stuff on floor and vault for a little bit longer, but bars is really going to expose any flaws in an athlete's physical preparation, sort of any gaps and voids. And so when an athlete will lose a sense of or they lose strength or physical preparation, what they tend to then feel is that they've lost control. And whenever an athlete feels that they've lost control, they'll get scared. And I think that's what tends to happen with things like the flyaways or the backaways. We've got an athlete now attempting a skill. They might not be visual at all, therefore they don't have the sense of awareness and the confidence. They might not be confident in their strength on that skill. The prerequisites to that, which could be their ability just to swing and do a backward giant beautifully, might be compromised as well. And therefore that's going to impact the way that the athlete will feel about the dismount also. So there's a lot of things here which are contributing to the athlete potentially feeling like they're scared of that skill. And bars is one of the hardest skills to play on. So we're often encouraged to, let the kids play, let them go and have some fun and just be creative and Go play on trampoline. Well, playing acrobatically is one thing, but playing when you're swinging around a bar is actually a little bit trickier. And part of the reason behind that is because the room for error is I think a lot larger in terms of how does an athlete fall safely on bars. Acrobatically, it's a little bit easier. You over rotate, you can manage that safely. If you under rotate, there's ways of turning out of these skills. On bars, the impact of making a mistake whilst playing can be more significant. And I think, again, that's why athletes are quite scared of doing so, and quite rightly. So what I'm trying to get at here is that bars, you need an enormous amount of preparation to get to the stage where, excuse me, you're going to have a gymnast who's really comfortable doing dismounts. And that's before we even talk about vision. That's just referring to their ability to swing, their ability to demonstrate a beautiful handstand, support their own weight, understand the timing of the tap and the way that changes direction. There's a lot in that which is going to contribute to the skill. Now, if we're specifically talking about vision here, which I think was pretty much the context of the question, when you're teaching vision, you're pretty much always going to be looking at one of two places, either the body or the apparatus. We should try and avoid giving the athlete an external cue, such as the building that the gymnast is performing in. So some coaches will ask the kids to look at the ceiling or aim their feet towards the roof, the lights or something like that. Now, the problem of that is as soon as you change the environment, that cue is no longer there. So kicking towards the feet, looking at the knees, looking at the hips, the chest, looking down your leotard, looking at the bar. These are all cues that are transferable. You go from gym to gym, from piece to piece, events to event in US language, and to a competition venue. Those cues are going to remain consistent. So if I was describing where the visual cues would be in a flyaway dismount, let's start first of all with the handstand before the downswing. And the athlete here will be looking towards the bar. Just subtly, the ears should be covered by the arms. So we're literally just having the athlete peer at the top of their gaze towards where the bar is. The head is not out. That's really, really important. Now, as the athlete starts to descend, go on the downswing, we want them to look at the low bar. And that's assuming that the low bar is in place. Now, again, this serves a couple of purposes. One of them is just to give them a sense of awareness of how close is that bar to their feet. And being aware of it takes away the guessing phase of it, or the guessing part. So looking at the low bar all the way down until the feet have passed the bar should help with the confidence and therefore the technique. Once we're past that point, the head's just going to stay in the same position. And on the rise of the swing, on the tap here, we now want the athlete to be looking towards either their knees or their feet on the way up. And that's it. For the rest of the flyaway, their eyes will stay in that position. They might just look behind themselves in order to land and see the floor, but that's where we are deliberately asking the athletes to look. So if they're doing things like candlestick drills or shoulder stands, depending on what language you use, those are the visual references. Look at the feet, look at the knees, look at the leotard, look at the body somewhere there, which is going to give them some of those benefits that I mentioned before. Now, just because they're visual doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to just be a magic solution. Gymnasts are still going to be scared of letting go. They need to make sure their shoulder angle's in the right position. They need to make sure that they're traveling the correct distance away from the bar and that the tap's consistent. So we've got to see that vision is just another cog in the technical wheel. By taking that cog out, slows things down. By adding things in, makes things more efficient, hopefully more easy. But it's not going to be a magic wand solution. So what I would recommend is just hundreds and hundreds of repetitions of doing the candlesticks. The shoulder stands is what I would typically call that. So doing it from a swing, do it from a low cast, do it from a high cast, do it from a back giant. Just work those shoulder stands from all sorts of different positions until the athlete knows it inside out and has got a real good sense of control of their body. And you'll feel that as a coach because you'll be spotting that most likely. You want to make sure that they are, consistently putting their body in the right position, that you can feel that the release point is correct. They're moving away from the bar at a safe distance and all these things. And once you've got that to a consistent level, of course, you can start to think about then turning that dismount over. Now, again, this is quite a big step for a lot of gymnasts. The difference between doing a shoulder stand where the coach might be cradling them, physically holding them and supporting them, to now flipping over. So if possible, And this depends on the competency of the person spotting, I guess the size of the athlete, how strong they are, etc. It's really good to be able to go up to that shoulder stand position, pause for a moment, and then have the coach rotate the athlete afterwards. Now, that's super easy to do with your younger gymnasts, your smaller gymnasts, and it's also easier to do if you've got a double spot as well, 2 people handling it. If you don't have that luxury, then you might not be able to do that, of course, where you're physically cradling someone upside down before actually flipping them over. And therefore using some of the drills, such as a decline wedge, like a slope where they release up to shoulder stand and then immediately backward roll down, can be good drills. Now, I'll be honest, it's not one that I use personally myself, because I find that the athlete doesn't want to tap, because actually the rotation is a bit scary. If they're just going to land on their back, then they don't want to create rotation, do they? Whereas we really want them to create rotation. So I'm not a massive fan of the decline slope if they're performing it individually, but if there's a coach there kind of shadowing and making sure they don't over rotate, I think that drill can work as well. So I think I've answered the question here. So I've talked about making sure the cues are ones that are transferable from environment to environment. Talked about where the visual references should be, hundreds of candlesticks, making sure that the physical preparation is excellent so that they feel in control. And if they don't feel in control, the flyaway is probably not going to happen. And then when you're in the teaching process, just be super, super patient. I like to alternate between doing the candlesticks and then turning them. So they'll do one flyaway, one shoulder stand, one flyaway, one shoulder stand, or they might even do 3 shoulder stands, 1 flyaway. And that way you're really reinforcing the importance of getting to that shoulder stand position, not letting the head go back and all those sorts of things there. So hopefully that is useful, but feel free to dig deeper if not.
So 2 things there. One is, I feel like I have to just send you money and pay you for a master class that just happened in like a dissertation in flyaways. And 2 is, I think I'm also going to pay you to just call me at like 9 every night and just like slowly just like talk, because I can just very soothing with your new mic and your delivery. So
I thought I was going to send you to sleep there, Dave. I was thinking.
No. It's very calming, relaxing. I can absorb information.
That's good to hear.
No, that was extremely helpful. And so, yeah, I think you more than delivered on helping somebody. If you have any more questions after that, please drop them in the chat. But I feel like that was a super helpful kind of like dissertation there. So very good. All right. Next one we have is for Victoria. So Victoria, it says, I love the lecture you gave on vault at the symposium. So much good information and drills. My question is about body tension on the board. We've tried so many shaping drills or work with the little ones, but it seems they flop when they hit the board. And as a result, the compulsories really struggle for good vaults. Do you have any more tips?
Yeah. Well, first off, let me just say thank you for having me back, and everybody can hear me, right? I'm unmuted. Perfect. I'm so excited to be here. I love gymnastics, love coaching gymnastics, and I love this community and being able to share everything that I have learned with everybody else, and being able to learn from all these awesome coaches. But to answer that question, I think first off, especially when you're working with compulsory athletes, which is my absolute favorite thing, you are generally working with younger athletes. And I think whenever you're struggling with anything, the first question that you need to ask yourself is, are my athletes really struggling with this, or are my athletes struggling with comprehension? Do my athletes know what I'm asking of them? And so you're working with these young kids. And I think a really good way to test that is to give them a scale. So you want to say, if I say number 10, I want you to show me the tensest you could be on the board. Hit the board as hard as you can. If I say number 1, I want you to be as loose as possible. And I always use like fun words like be a wet noodle, because you're working with young kids and we want to give them those things that they really like relate to and figure out what you're asking. And so to say, if I say 1, you do that. If I say 10, you do this. And you can kind of build it up. So you start at 1, and little kids love doing things wrong on purpose. That's absolutely so fun for them. So if you tell them, jump on the springboard as loose as you can be, then they jump on and they do that, and then say, okay, now I'm going to go up, I'm going to say number 4, try to go to a level of 4. And then you see if they are getting a little bit more tense, and if you get all the way up to the 10 and you see that there's a big difference between the 1 and the 10, then that is just showing you that yes, your athletes are understanding what you're asking, especially those younger kids. But so maybe there is just a problem with actual body tension on the board. But first thing, I would definitely make sure that you're checking, do my athletes understand what I'm asking of them? First off, is this just a comprehension issue, or are they really struggling with body tension on the board? And that just is in general with all things in compulsory gymnastics and with working with younger athletes. So if you have done that and you figured out, no, my kids are actually really having an issue with body tension on the board, I would first ask you to look inwardly at what your mood is when you're coaching vault, because vault is about aggression, and there's a lot of different moods that happen in gymnastics. And I talk to my athletes about this a lot in compulsory gymnastics. Like when we're on floor and we're doing dance and we're being elegant and long and beautiful, I like speak in a different way. I'm like, okay, now we're going to move our arms and now hold our core tight and pull the hands up, wrists flat, and I'm just kind of using that. And when you're coaching vault, I'm at the vault table, slapping the vault table as hard as I can, kind of like, go, 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 go.
Go ahead, Ella. Come on, girl. Power. Reach for the white line. Oh, that was it, right? Yes, queen.
Getting them in that mood, they have to have that sort of aggression if you want them to be tense on the board. So a lot of the things that I do with my athletes is we play a lot of games. Don't take the play aspect out of gymnastics with your compulsory gymnasts and your younger gymnasts, because a lot of times they figure things out through play. And especially with things like board punching, chances are they're probably not going to get hurt or form bad habits with board punching. And so you want to let them play a little bit. And so just having them run down the vault runway and just jump over things, crush the springboard as hard as they can, and jump over a pool noodle or jump onto higher mats and stack them higher and higher, make it a competition. But getting them in that aggressive mindset and aggressive mood is really going to help them to stay tense on the board. Sometimes if I have kids that really, really struggle with it and they just hit the board and you don't see a lot happening in their midsection, I have them kind of yell when they hit the board. Obviously, I don't do that like when they're actually vaulting, but running, jumping, hitting the springboard, going, ah, as they hit the springboard and just jumping up onto the mat. If you're in my gym listening to me coach lower level vault, you probably can't hear anything else because I'm just screaming down there and just having a bunch of fun. But I think if you get your kids into that mindset, because you mentioned, doing a bunch of shaping and things like that, I feel like shaping sometimes doesn't really get kids into an aggressive mindset because they're thinking so much and they're like, oh, where am I looking? What muscles am I squeezing? And so shaping is really great. And I do a lot of it at vault, but you also just need to make sure that you've got just that raw aggression going while they're at vault. One of the drills, if you're looking for drills, that's going to help a little bit with body tension. I do think a lot of it is just like a mood thing. But one of the drills that will help with body tension is I stand up like on the resi mat, put my arms out. The girls are on the springboard. They're going to grab my like forearms or my elbow area. And I'm just like having them hit the springboard. And I'm just kind of pushing them down onto the springboard. Again, I use a scale with them. I say, okay, show me a loose one, because I want them to feel the difference. They have to understand. And if they understand in compulsory gymnastics, then by the time they make it up to their optional coach is just going to have a much easier time with them. And so I'm like, show me your loosest board punches. And they're like doing this, on the board, loose midsection. And I'm like, okay, now tighten up. Let's go all the way to a 10. And I'm like, okay, show me a 5 somewhere in the middle. Okay, show me 1. And they loosen up. And then once they're getting that 10 and that 10 starts increasing for them and I can see that, then I feel like I'm on the right track with them. But I think definitely, just to sum it up, a lot of vault coaching is just getting them, especially in compulsory gymnastics, getting them in the mood to be like running, barreling down it and just crushing the springboard. And I think a lot of the tension comes from that aggression, because if I just said to you right now, get aggressive, like what would you like tighten up your fists and your core tightens up and all your muscles get a little bit more tense. And so if you get into that aggressive mood rather than a graceful mood, or oh we're doing shaping, everybody, if you get into that kind of thing, it just in general just will get your athletes to be a little bit more tense. I hope that's helpful.
I absolutely love that. And I definitely would love to be at your gym when you're yelling, hitting the board or the table, and they're yelling when they're hitting the springboard. I feel like that would be the most exciting thing to watch ever. Thank you for that. That was super, super helpful. All right. So before we go on to the next one, we are going to do our first giveaway. So the first person who's going to win here, you are going to win a year to the Hero Lab. So you'll win a full year membership to the Hero Lab, which is exciting. So I think Becky pulled a number. It was randomly generated, and that person is Heather Clayton. So congrats to you for winning, and thank you. If you want to email Taylor at shiftmovementscience.com, she will set you up with your prize. So thank you for being here live, and congratulations. So on that note, next one here we have is Pat. Pat, this one's for you. It says, All right. I coach young boys and I struggle so much to actually keep them focused and on task. I love them, but it's so stressful to actually get things done. I'm wondering if you can share anything from your culture point of view to make it not feel like I am working in a zoo, which as someone who has coached, young boys when I was growing up, I think working in a zoo sometimes feels quite accurate. So Pat, what do you think?
I think it's first of all, thanks for having me, Nick, and Victoria. I totally want to come and watch your bolt sessions as well. So I hope you don't mind. I might hit you up next time I'm in America. So with young boys, I think it comes down to making sure the sessions are fun and engaging. That's the first thing. So I said this in the podcast, so a lot of what I'm saying now I'll probably be repeating for the first time, but I hope that's all right. You've got to make sure that the circuits you're doing are nice and fast paced and aren't slow. If athletes stay at one station for say a minute to 2 minutes, they're going to get bored, and you've got two effects that happen from that. The quality drops, where they actually just don't care as much about the skill they're doing. So they start having poor repetitions where they're not actually learning to do nice gymnastics. But two, they're going to start looking for ways to entertain themselves, which could be talking to the person next to them. It could be flipping something upside down. It could be just like literally pulling your gym apart. Like they could be breaking stuff, So I think one of the key things I do is make sure that we're rotating people through our circuits nice and quickly. The second thing would be like understanding that you need to drip feed discipline, especially I think with boys, but I think with every athlete, you need to just gradually ramp up your expectations. So when I first coach a group of like 5-year-old pre-competitive boys where we're just in the gym for an hour and we're just trying to have fun, but I do also want these kids to start learning to behave well, my expectations are very different to the 9-year-olds that I'm now coaching. So I do little things like try to teach them to line up very quickly. So I want them to just understand through games how when I give them an instruction, I expect it to be done really quickly. But I don't want to yell and hit the floor with a stick because they're going too slow. I just want them to understand, hey, when Pat says, line up, the expectation is it's done in 3 seconds. So now with my older group of 9-year-olds, we had all these games when I first started coaching them where I'd put my arm out and I'd count down from 3. And no matter where they were, they had to sprint into line and get there. If they didn't do it, we'd go and we'd do some sort of activity like push-ups together, and then we'd do it again. And I made it fun and I made it engaging. And I did that for, the first year. I haven't had to do that in ages. And now if we've been setting up a circuit and I just say, okay, line up, within about 3 seconds, they're always in front of me in a line and I don't have to enforce that anymore. The weird thing is when we have a new person that comes into the group that hasn't been with me for a while, they always have a fair bit of lag time, but now because the group is so good at it, they kind of enroll into that. So yeah, that would be the other thing, is just kind of drip feeding those things and considering what kind of behavior do you want. And just like a skill in gymnastics, what behavior do you want? How can you break it down and gradually ramp up the expectations with that behavior? Last thing, kids love high fives. Kids will do pretty much anything for a high five, and young boys especially. Like when I high five my guys at the end of the night, like half of them run to the other end of the line to try to get another one. It's annoying the hell out of me. So use that as bribery. Tell them they're going to win an invisible trophy. Like literally any sort of little hack to get them motivated helps a lot. And I think the last little thing I'll just throw in there is if they're really into you as a person and want to impress you, like if they're just like diehard, love gymnastics, love training with you, just want to impress you, you still need to teach the behaviors, but they'll go to the end of the world for you. They'll follow you. So that's one of the key things.
That's great. I mean, who doesn't want a high five, right? Like I would definitely work harder for if my boss gave me more high fives. And I mean, I'm also a big fan of Pat too, so I can see why the kids would be a fan of you as well.
Thanks, mate.
That was super helpful. All right, next one, Lindsay, this one is for you. So this one says, your symposium talk was super helpful to understand things, but cast handstands seem to still be our nemesis. We feel like we are doing tons of drills and spotting and warm-ups, but our angles are never quite in that 45 plus to handstand. Do you have any must-have drills or strength that seems to make things, make the most impact? Thank you.
Yeah. So can you guys definitely hear me? Okay, cool. So I thought a lot about this earlier. And so I did first want to talk a little bit about spotting, because the way that you spot sometimes can help or hurt the athlete. So the way that you spot is really critical. One, you want to be making sure that you're actually putting them in the exact right position because when you're stepping into spot, you're creating the perfect shape. So if they're practicing something even slightly imperfect, they're just going to repeat that when your hands go away. So I would step back, analyze the way you're spotting, not just on the floor drills, but also on the bar. Then secondly, I would analyze the kip next, because oftentimes really it's the kip that creates the lack of cast. So the athlete is not extending the glide fully, snapping the feet to the bar and finishing the kip in a nice tight pike to actually properly load the cast. The feet start to slide back. And if you're not quite sure about that, just take a couple videos of your athletes, go to YouTube, find some really strong kip casters and compare and contrast. Like, wow, when she finishes here, that athlete's really pulled up and loaded. When my kids are finishing, their feet are already starting to drift back. And that very well could actually be your problem, which is why the drills aren't helping. But then to still answer you specifically, if your athletes are little, I would recommend this, and I hope that you can see me. I happen to be in the gym.
Let's go.
Hey, Callie, can I steal you, Callie?
This is amazing. This is perfect. Hi, Callie.
Hi, love. We're going to do some presses. I'm going to take my earbuds out so I can press her, though.
Sure. This is incredible.
All right,
She had parallels there waiting. That's amazing.
Oh, wait, hold on. Can I press this?
That's okay.
A little bit more.
Yeah, there it is. Callie has no idea what's happening. Dig it.
All right, so I couldn't pull my
amazing.
back enough, but
Amazing.
so if they're little enough, you just can't ever skip that tuck press. And I think that tuck press compression, keeping the chest in and learning how to roll through their body correctly, then up to the handstand. We really try to get 10 spotted easy to a 30-second handstand back to a controlled tuck down in our pre-team level 4 and 5. And that's what's going to lead to the proper, strength needed when they need to kip cast handstand. If your athletes are past that, or we're talking about older kids or Excel kids, the handstand trainer is your best friend, because as we've talked about before, the spotter, I'm not that big. So my ability to take a 140-pound athlete and do that with them 10 times is not there either. So finding that happy medium, getting them to do the tuck hold while you're then actually monitoring the handstand trainer, making sure they're actually using their shoulders correctly and just really building that shoulder strength. So I think those would be my biggest suggestions, other than spotting and analyzing the kip.
Yeah, super helpful. And I think that live demo was epic. So thank you. That definitely helped a lot.
If you guys want me to show anything else, I'm in the middle of my gym.
This is great.
When Nick was talking, I almost turned around my thing because my 6'7" coach was actually doing exactly what he was talking about in the moment. I'm watching her and I'm like, this is what he means.
Not a plant, just a process of really good coaching all intertwining. So yeah, that's great.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Next one here. Thank you, Lindsay, is going to be for Nick. So Nick from Megan says, when structuring a workout on bars, what do you find most important? Do you put more importance on basics and then moving into skills and routines? Or do you start your workout with focused drills, then move into what skills you are focusing on for that day? I feel as coaches, we get overwhelmed with trying to fit in lines, conditioning, basics, and then obviously working the skill. Just curious what you would do in a normal 45 minutes. I am very curious about this one. Great question.
Yeah, that is a very good question. It's quite a lot to talk about this. So I would say, first of all, nothing is more important than basics when it comes to bar development. So we should never compromise basics for anything else that goes in the program, because of course, what we understand in the layers of skills, that a giant becomes a giant with a pirouette, right? A giant becomes a release and catch. A basic dismount becomes an advanced dismount. A circle element becomes an advanced one, or maybe a circle element into a release. So we've got to make sure that we never compromise the basics, so that they've got to be first priority. With that in mind, I'm a fan of doing a little bit of basic skills every single day. Some clubs like to do it all after a rest day. Let's take they have a Sunday off and they come in on a Monday and they use most of their bar time on a Monday to do their basics. I'm not so much a fan of that. I believe that we should drip feed that throughout the entirety of the week, because just in terms of how the brain operates, by doing more reps, more frequency throughout the week, it's going to have a better impact on skill acquisition and development. So I think that's important. So if in a 45-minute session, which I think is what Megan had mentioned here, I would have at least the first third of that training time, let's call that 15 minutes, dedicated to some kind of basic warm-up. Now, the term basic needs, first of all, a little bit of clarity and context, because basics for a 9-year-old is a little bit different to basics for a 15-year-old, right? Or let's say a high performance 15-year-old versus a 9-year-old that's hoping to go down that pathway. The 9-year-olds might be working on kip caster handstands, backward giants, swings, and circle elements. They would be basic elements for them, and very important ones to work on. For a 15-year-old, let's say that's a junior on the performance pathway, you know, a high performance athlete, their basics are going to look a little bit different. They might start off with some kip handstands and some giants, but they might then go into consecutive swing and turns on bars. They might do, flyaways to back with their arms up, ready for their double back dismounts. They might do consecutive close bars and start combining stoulders with free hips and toe-ons, maybe even add some pirouettes to those. Now, they're still considered their basic elements for them. For some athletes, doing a release and catch on its own is a basic skill to perform, because what they're used to doing in routine is doing that in combination. So we've got to understand there's context behind what is basic for each particular athlete. But if we think of basics being the fundamentals, the prerequisite skills which underpin where they're at in their skill development journey. Okay, so we need to make sure we get that in. So it's the first 15 minutes. Now, kip handstands clearly are going to be very important, but I think that a lot of coaches lack creativity in the way that they do that, because there's lots of ways of doing kip handstands. You can do them on the low bar. You can do them on the high bar consecutively. You can face in and out on both of those rails, because that makes a difference. You can do drop kips. You can do kip handstand with pirouettes. There's all sorts of different ways of actually training the kip handstand. It doesn't just have to be the mundane 5 kip handstands in a row or 10 in a row on the low bar facing inwards. So kind of mix things up a bit, because variety is going to be important. And particularly, these gymnasts hopefully are going to be doing bars for over a decade with you. You don't want to be coming to bars and doing the same basic warm-up every single day. So kip handstands, some circle elements there. So that might be soul circles for your younger kids. It could be consecutive toe onto handstands for the next lot up, and backward giants and things. I'd like to get all of that done the first 15 minutes. Now, if they're entering a competition phase, I might substitute those isolated sets of basics for what I call a skeleton routine. So rather than doing a few sets of kip handstands, a couple of sets of giants, maybe some turns, I'm going to merge that together and start to create this skeleton routine, because actually we need to be moving towards routine construction from an endurance perspective, from a psychological perspective, and just really the ability to piece skills together. So the skeleton routine could look like kip handstand twice in a row consecutively, into free hip to handstand, toe handstand, shoot up to the high bar, kip handstand, stolder, 3 giants, fly away. So it's still very basic maybe for this particular athlete, but you're just piecing things together to develop that level of endurance. Again, there's just variety in the way that you're integrating basics into your session. Okay, now, whilst they're doing that, then, side stations are always going to be there. So there could be shape-specific stuff. It could be just drills, essentially, to improve the giants, etc. But once we've got that part of the session out the way, I want to then lead into, I guess, the main menu. What is the main objective of that training session? What is it that the athlete is learning? And I'm a big fan of choosing a theme, which all the gymnasts in the group will participate in. And what I mean by that is that, let's imagine that the average listener now has got 8 kids in their group. If you assign some of them on giants, some of them on flyaways, some of them on circle elements, etc., you're going to be split with your time, and it's pretty difficult to manage that from a coaching perspective, or at least to coach that effectively. I'm a great believer in everybody in the group following one theme, and they'll just fit into the different stage of that theme that they're at. So let's say we've done our basics, and the theme of the session is going to be circle elements. Now, some athletes are already competent and able to do 3 toe handstands in a row. Great. They're going to work on toe handstands with a pirouette. Some of the younger kids might just be doing soul circles. Great. We'll get a station ready for those. Some of them are trying to piece together consecutive toe handstands. So basically all the bar stations, the side stations, the physical preparation is all related around that one theme. everyone's working on the same thing, but you just position them on the appropriate part of the skill ladder that they're on. Now, I find that makes it really easy or much easier to deliver a purposeful session. You can line your gymnasts up together and basically say, today, whilst we're working on these circle elements, I'm going to be focusing on your extension and making sure that your ears are covered at all times throughout the elements. That's what I'm most looking forward to seeing. I want to see, I don't know, who can move on to the next stage up the ladder, who's going to move from soul circles to doing it on the metal bar, from handstand to handstand for the first time. And you can create this kind of energy within the group because they're all challenging each other, they're all rivaling each other. And I just find it's really convenient, much more convenient than separating the athletes into lots of different things. So hopefully that answers most of the question there. So just to recap, the first sort of third of training time is on fundamentals. Those fundamentals should pretty organically move into the main of the system. I pick a theme, everyone sits on that theme. And of course, it's not uncommon to choose more than one theme. I might not do circle elements for 30 minutes. I might go 15 minutes of fundamentals, 15 minutes on circles, and 15 minutes on dismounts. And that way we're getting a few different skills done. Now, I think Megan had mentioned specifically about feeling overwhelmed, and I absolutely can understand why, because it is incredibly overwhelming, and I feel the same still. I tend to do a lot of the specific conditioning and the floor lines, which she's referenced in the question, separately. I wouldn't really do that on the event time. I do that in physical preparation time. And that might be a luxury that I've had in the past with the volume of training that I'm doing with the athletes. But I think where possible, once you get to the event, try and stay as event specific as you can, and just be all consumed in that one theme, as opposed to trying to do too many other side stations, which might not be relevant to the theme of the session. That's kind of how I feel about that. So yeah, again, Megan, thank you for your question. If I can dig deeper, then please agitate me to do so if I haven't fulfilled the question enough. But thanks.
No, I think that was super duper helpful. And yeah, Megan, if you have any more questions, just drop them below, and Nick can kind of chat back and forth with you. But super helpful. All right, so next one is going to be for Victoria. This is from Nathan. This is a fantastic question. So it says, we are working on our rec staff training to improve the quality of our rec program and the coaches. What are some of the strategies, techniques, or systems that you have found effective in teaching progressions, and why those progressions are important to rec coaches? Also, how can we get them to buy into these progressions, especially when most of the rec staff are younger and or part-time and may not have as much of a learning mindset? So great question, Nathan. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Victoria.
Yeah, I love this question. I am super passionate about having a great rec program as a gym owner, because rec programs are really your bread and butter. And I love recreational gymnastics. We pull most of our competitive team kids from recreational gymnastics as well. And so it really is such an important staple in your gym. The interesting part about this question, so I think that maybe just a little change of your mindset, because when high school kids go get their first job and they're working like McDonald's, they don't tell you, well, I like to put the cheese outside the buns, and that's just how I make my hamburgers, because there's just a way to do it, and the buns go on the outside of the hamburger. And when they're working at McDonald's, this is how you make the Big Mac, and they follow the instructions and they make the Big Mac because that's their job. And so I think that maybe taking a little bit of the control out of younger, untrained coaches' hands is something that would benefit your program. And so I don't really give my rec coaches an option. They have to use progressions. It's designed right into our recreational program. One of the tips that I'm going to give you, so when you're designing a recreational program, also plug, that's something that I do. I have a recreational program curriculum that you can find on my website. But when you're designing recreational program, if you really want to do that yourself and you don't want to outsource that, you make the progressions part of the program to the point where, so you have to evaluate skills to move up through the levels, right? And so you want to evaluate drills as skills. And so my recreational coaches that come in, maybe with a little bit of gymnastics experience, with no gymnastics experience, with just experience working with children, like our beginner 1 level has a plie releve on beam. And that is going to be a progression towards every single jump on balance beam forever and ever and ever. But I want my coaches to be evaluating the plie releve so that the kids can't miss that step of learning to bend and push through the balance beam, because it's a crucial step, especially in a recreational program where they're only there, maybe an hour or 2 a week. You don't want to skip those little things. And so by forcing your staff, that's a terrible word, but that's really what you're doing, forcing your staff to evaluate the drills and not always the skills. You don't want to just jump and go ahead to, okay, now it's split jumps. I want to see your kids doing split jumps. You want to break that down for them and say, evaluate their plie releve, then evaluate their plie stretch jump landing, then evaluate their plie split jump landing. And so you want to break down each of those skills. So if you're looking to revamp your recreational program, you make sure that you give the rec staff a goal. People love to have goals. And so you want to tell your rec staff, like, the goal is for you to teach these kids how to do a proper plie releve. The goal is for you guys to teach these kids how to get to a releve step lock. Because that's what comes before the pivot turn. They have to lock into that flat front of the ankle releve position on balance beam. And if you write into your curriculum those steps, then they will follow them. One of the things that I do with my curriculum is I have it divvied up. So it's just divided into different color coded sections. And each week they're working different colors. And so they're working blue skills for 3 weeks in a row and then evaluating them, pink skills 3 weeks in a row and then evaluating them. And by doing that, you don't have your coaches going rogue. Coaches that don't understand progressions yet. And so sometimes if coaches don't understand progressions yet, you force feed them to them, and then they become familiar with you as the professional who's been doing this for a long time. They become familiar with the progressions that they use. Once they get to a point where they have successfully used progressions that are tried and true and proven, then if they want to say, you know what, I actually want to add this drill in there, by all means, that's really cool. But if they have zero experience and you're the one with the experience and you're the professional, you need to give them the tools to make that happen. But like I said, I think it's just a little bit of a mindset switch. They're coming in to do a job. They're employed by you. You give them the directions and they follow them. That's what having, a job is. And so you don't just want to leave them to their own devices. And so you just need to kind of make sure that you've got the reins on your rec program. I hope that that's helpful.
Yeah, super helpful. And I think that's definitely a really important point, which is the majority of people actually probably want a system to follow and they really want to, get some guidance. I think my experience with rec staff and being a rec staff is you kind of want to get that information and kind of have those progressions. They're looking for those steps. So yeah, I can't stress that enough of how good it is. Like, yeah, this is our system. We're going to follow this. Once you get up the road a little bit, you can kind of tweak it and add your own drills, but that's super duper helpful. All right. So let's do one more question and then giveaway number 2, but this one's coming to Pat. This comes from Nuno. It says, for Pat Redfern, do you have a specific approach to start a new strength element in MAG, or is it the same as technical elements?
Sorry, forgot to unmute. Thanks, Nuno. So yes, I do think it's very similar. Strength in MAG and in every apparatus is a technical element, and every technical element has an element of strength and physical preparation to it. So I kind of try to see them both the same sort of way. So what I do is if I want a kid to be able to do a straddle press to handstands, all right, and I might want them to do it by the time they're 7 years old, and I got them started in lower level classes at 5. I have a think about what are the components that are going to make up that straddle press. So they'll need straddle flexibility. They'll need to be able to compress and lift their legs up towards themselves. They'll need to have maybe a middle split or the ability to go wide with their legs on the way up. I'll need to have some shoulder strength to open. I'll need to have some chest strength to stay round. They'll probably need some balance in handstands. So I consider all of those little points that I'm going to want and need. And I make sure that they're incorporated into a lot of different aspects of training. So if you were to watch my guys as we go through like a normal training session, you'd notice that on every apparatus, there's kind of some sneaky thing to do with press to handstands. It might not be literally press to handstands, but there's always some sort of conditioning or some sort of flexibility thing that's going to help that press, because it's such a fundamental skill in MAG and I think WAG as well. So I definitely consider like that is my approach, is to try break the skill down into what are the different bits that we need and how can we feed it throughout the training session, and also like feed it throughout their journey as a gymnast. Another maybe good example of this is a V-sit. For guys, I'm a really big fan of developing mana, because I think it gives you a lot of transfer to P-bars and pommel horse and just general shoulder strength and health. So to work on that, my 5-year-olds, one of the first things they do, I don't know, I can't really demonstrate right now, but they sit on parallettes with their legs apart, and they just have to try to get their legs to come together and then come back onto the parallettes without letting them drop down and touch the floor. I call it scissor legs. So they're just scissoring their legs forward and backward. And, you know, at first they're going to be dropping their legs, and the first goal for maybe the first couple of weeks is just to see if they can do it without their legs dropping down. Then it might be to get their legs there a little bit bent. Let's get the legs straight. Okay, that's awesome. You've done that so well. Okay, now let's try to do 3 in a row really quick before your legs touch the bars again. And then once they've got that, you're awesome. You're doing it 5 in a row. That's crazy. Put a box in front of them, little box. Okay, now you got to go above the box. Right, and I just do that, and then I get the box bigger and bigger, and then the box becomes, you know, a pommel horse right up in front of their face, and you have rules. Okay, you hold that for 3 seconds now. Like, no one's allowed to hold for less than 3 seconds, and you have to lower back down. So I'm getting control. If you do it, if you get that, now you have to move closer. That's one of our rules. You know, you get it for 3 seconds, fantastic. Now move closer, try again. And so the box, the pommel is just constantly getting closer to them, constantly lifting it up. And so those progressions my athletes and my coaches have been doing for a while. And pretty much I'd say like 80% of my competitive program can all V-sit really well. You know, and because of that, also their flexibility is quite good too in things like pike, and you see that transfer over to other skills too. So that's kind of my approach. Just drip feed, break things down, consider what are the components that you need, and then just like go after it.
Yeah, I love that too. And that aspect of like gamification is something that I think that everybody can take home, right? Like trying to make it a little competition and this, then that, and the next step. And I love how you're like, oh man, I can't believe you did that. Like little kids love that. Like, I bet you can do it. Can you do it? Like, so like whether you're working in men's or women's or tramp or tumbling, whatever, like literally anybody of that younger age demographic probably will love some of that gamification type stuff like that. So yeah, super helpful.
Can I throw one thing out with that as well? Like, especially if you're in a circuit, like that V-sit station that I was just describing is a part of every circuit I do on P-bars. It's just always there. It's just a station the kids just know to set it up. There's a few things like that in my program that's just a staple. And all you have to do to make those kids work really hard at that is maybe twice a session, look over at it and say, whoa, Josh, dude, that was sick. Everyone just stop for a second. Let's have a quick look. Josh just did that with straight legs. Watch this, watch this. And he holds it, and then everyone cheers for him. And then you move on, and you just look out of the corner of your eye, and you'll have the hardest working athletes on that station for the rest of the session. It just takes 1 or 2 times.
I love it. Do you have any openings that I can come and maybe join that class? It sounds pretty fun.
Yes, please come. You'll have great fun.
Wow, Dave, great visa. I can't do a visa anymore. Anyways, okay, second giveaway here. This one is actually shout out to Tumble Track, who is going to be hooking someone up with this. Is we have an athlete wellness kit and journal, and this one is going to, we had a random number generator just so everyone knows it's fair. But Lisa Waters, congratulations, you won that. If you want to email Taylor at clap it up. If you want to email Taylor at shiftmovementscience.com, she will connect you to James, who is the CEO of Tumble Track. He's just going to send you that directly and save the shipping loop to loop there. So congratulations on the number 2. All right. So we have 3 more here in the docket. And then there's actually one really good question I'd like to finish with doing a roundtable with everyone's going to kind of do it related to like some culture change stuff. So that'd be really cool. All right. So Lindsay, this one's coming for you from Laura. It says, what would be the preferred order of different active flexibility drills, if that matters at all? For example, leg kicks that are fast with power versus more controlled versus holds. I think that's kind of like the sequencing order she's asking about.
I don't know that there's any hard and fast rules, to be honest with you. But if you look at almost all professional sports, not just gymnastics, in their basic warm-up, there is some sort of low intensity leg swing. Even if you watch like football players, any other pro athletes, they're walking across the field, they're swinging their legs. It's not always beautiful. For us, obviously, we'd like it to be beautiful, but not necessarily like all the way up. Like we're talking easy leg swings around level, just loosening that up. Then actually, if I was thinking a little bit about my workout, so after we have that in our basic warm-up, then we do usually do some sort of holding and then some resistance work like at level and then slightly above level, and then a little bit at end range, and then some like resistance. So like getting to end range and pushing down, then pushing back up just in that like little area, just to make sure that you're really protecting their hip, and everything that goes along with that. Then you can actually start doing some significant active flex, really dynamic kicking, jumping on trampoline, going all of the way, anything with your TheraBands, please no ankle weights. I think that's been thoroughly talked about now, but just to make sure we're continuing that. And then, you know, ending with holds. You know, we do a lot of holds at the end of the day, actually. So I hope that helps a little bit. That's what I would recommend, is a way to get that through your day. And then, of course, depending on whether you're going to beam first or floor first, you know, you might change that a little bit, but that's what I would generally recommend. Do you have any comments on that, Dave, from a PT perspective?
Yeah, no, I agree with what you said. I think that there's no magic, answer, to give you the perfect order. But yeah, generally, I think, as you said, with kind of like the flow of things, is definitely some sort of like, any of your more basic soft tissue prep, then your dynamic warp generally is probably really important to get everything warmed up and get the entire body kind of ready. And then, yeah, definitely saving some of the more dynamic or like really hard holds at the end is probably better, because obviously the joint in your body is warmed up. So yeah, I agree. Okay, cool. So next one here is coming to Nick. Nick, this is definitely an easy one, not complex. There's no controversy here at all. Pretty simple answer, but what's your preference on body shape or chest position on a board entry for yurchenko? So yeah, definitely no conflicting views on this at all.
Thank you. Well, it's fine. Because I have my own concepts of it, and you have to have conviction in whatever you believe in. So, yeah. And I can see very clearly why the alternative to the way that I do things is also a great method. But what I think you've got to do as coaches is find a system that fits for you. And you might still feel that other techniques are very valid, like I do, but they just don't fit in the methodology of the way that you work. So for me, and Dave, you'll be very aware of this, that when I'm teaching acrobatic development, one of my 4 S's is stiffness, which is the ability to be rigid and strong, and is usually achieved in a straight line. So from a springboard entry and a round off, I want the most upright position possible. If we could draw a line from the shoulder down all those major joints, so we go from the shoulder down through the hip, the knee, and the ankle, we want that to be pretty much in alignment. Now you're going to have a slight hinge at those joints, which is the correct thing to do, but we don't want to lose tension through those slight hinging. So, for example, the knee is going to bend a little bit, but that doesn't mean that it loses rigidity. It still has tension whilst it does so. So, achieving the most upright position possible is important to me. Now, reason behind that is because I approach the teaching of a yurchenko in the same way that I teach a double layout, and the same way that I teach a normal layout, a straight back. And therefore it fits my acrobatic system. And, acrobatic development is about trying to simplify things. So a beam dismount is very similar to a layout on the floor, because it's a layout from a round off. It's the same pretty much as a double layout entry on the floor as well. Very upright, arms are quite high. It's going to be very similar to what I teach and encourage in a round off on the springboard for yurchenko. So they all kind of fit into the same area. There's some subtle changes there, but ultimately they're very, very similar. And so by having the arms up and the body upright, it allows the hip to lift up very, very easily. It allows the center of mass to change from what is, first of all, moving in a horizontal way whilst the athlete runs and does their round off, to then very easily moving to a vertical direction, which needs to happen to get the hip high enough to contact the vaulting table, right? So that's my preference, is arms pretty tall. The minimum for me is going to be arms level with the eyes for younger athletes, but actually I'm already, even with young athletes, wanting them to be up by the ears. That's my ideal position. Now that's very idealistic, but I wouldn't expect a 9-year-old to be able to achieve that straight away. So we've got to think about what the end goal is versus what you're going to see to begin with some of these younger athletes. Just in case anyone's curious about what the alternative option is, it's very deliberately having the arms in a low position, and sometimes the hip even in more of a flex position on the springboard, which is more similar to the approach of a back handspring entry that you would do on the floor. So you do a round off into what many coaches will call a coil position or a C position, where the arms are parallel to the legs, pretty low down towards the floor. The hip is flexed. And the benefit of that is that you get a more aggressive action at opening the hips when you go from a closed hip position to an open hip position. So there is merit in doing that. But what I don't particularly like about that is the fact that that low position can encourage the shoulder to move backwards. Basically, the position is such a small shape that it's still rotating on the springboard potentially too much. So let's not get into the mechanics, as we're not using video here to kind of help. But ultimately, my rationale here is an upright position, because my approach to teaching yurchenko is not the back handspring approach. It's a layout and a double layout approach, which fits into my acrobatic system.
Very cool. Yeah, absolutely. That's super helpful. And then I think Lindsay wanted to kind of share some thoughts too. So Lindsay, what do you got?
So I recently had to become the vault coach, and I didn't want to, it was against my will, but here I am. And just in my experience, what I found, I agree with him with my very fast vaulters, like the kids that are super quick, they have to have their arms up by their ears because they are moving so fast. But in my gym, we have all sorts of gymnasts. We don't just take talent, we take all kids that love gymnastics. So some of my slower twitch kids, I have found that unless I actually use that coil shape, they're on way too high. They just move so slowly off the board no matter what you do. So I just thought I'd just put that in there, that I do think that is the ideal, but sometimes with your kids who are a little bit slow twitch, or maybe not your top level athlete, creating a little bit more shape change can help them get onto the table just a little bit better, because you're adjusting for their inability to really move quick, but still get a safe flip.
Dig it. Nick, you have any thoughts there?
Well, I'm in agreement. Ultimately, I think we've got to separate reality with, or the end result. As I mentioned before, you've got the end result that we're striving for, but everyone's journey to get there is a little bit different, right? So younger kids will struggle to have their arms vertical on the board because they don't have the upper body strength really to push off their hands and get upright. That might be the case on the floor, let alone going uphill onto an inclined springboard. So there has to be a tolerance there, I think. And Lindsay, you can't argue with experience. She's in the gym seeing those kids on a daily basis, and she's doing the right thing there by adapting to what they need, and I'm sure still encouraging the same coaching cues, but you have to work at the for the qualities of the athlete that you're seeing. So yeah, I'm in absolute agreement.
And to that, just to kind of finish this one off, Nick, what does height play a thing too? If you have athletes really tall, athletes really short, does that change your technique, or are you kind of continuing kind of down that path?
Well, context is going to be king. So you can have a tall athlete who's very strong. Sure. So actually, just because they're tall doesn't really make a difference. If they've got really good upper body strength and they're explosive, then they can still round off upright. Right. Equally, you can have a small kid that still can't round off properly, despite the mechanics suggesting that they should be able to rotate easier into a position, but actually they might lack upper body strength. So I'd be more inclined to be thinking about their physical qualities as opposed to their size and shape and dimensions and things. Yeah.
Cool. Also, just to shout out the ability to just chat about a conversation with multiple points of view and have it be very wonderful. So everybody else on Facebook and Twitter, calm down. Anyways, all
Twitter
right, so,
especially.
Yeah. So I think this last one here is for me, and then actually we're gonna end with a little round table one, which I think will be really, really helpful. So Lisa asked this one, and I'll just take it because it's around injuries. So it says, can you speak to punching and or pushing through the toes after coming back from an ankle injury? What are your go-to rehab and or strength building activities? So Lisa, I'm just going to assume that if it's a true rehab context, there's a physio involved, a PT involved, versus like if you're just a super compassionate, caring coach who just maybe knows they didn't get all the way there on the advanced level on rehab, that you're trying to kind of help them after they're out of pain and cleared. But I just want to kind of context that. But yeah, so for me, I think along the context, you have to kind of understand where the athlete is coming from in terms of what injury they had. Okay. The way that you rehab and give somebody a progression back to punching for someone who had an ankle sprain is like literally the different ballpark and the different parking lot as someone who had an Achilles repair or an Achilles injury or severs, right? Because cool. At least says they've been cleared from rehab. Correct. Wonderful. So someone who's coming back from an Achilles injury, a severed disease, a growth plate injury, an Achilles tendinopathy, an Achilles rupture, if you're a college athlete or an elite athlete, you have to go so much slower with getting back some of those progressions, right? Because that's literally what the Achilles tendon does versus someone who just has an ankle sprain, like who literally just lands short on a couple things and maybe has a small ankle crunch, or say they have an inversion sprain and they're off for 2 weeks, they come back. You can progress much faster, right? Because someone is obviously going to be probably getting over that quicker. So I have kind of milestones that I like to see in terms of the joint level thing. So one is that before they can start doing hardcore punching, you need to show just baseline mobility restoration, right? So if you can't point your toe the same equally as the other side, within maybe 10 degrees or 15 degrees, it's going to be really hard to get symmetrical punching, right? So a lot of times athletes will have a really bad ankle sprain, or they'll have some sort of really big swelling thing over a couple of weeks. So you have to kind of work on, can you just point your toes actively on each side? So that's kind of really important first. Can you point your toes equally? Can you pull your toes up equally? And sometimes athletes will never get that back, but that's really important to kind of get that back first. So beyond that though, the next level thing is just baseline strength. And I think this is actually, I'll take the L on the medical side. I think a lot of medical providers, unfortunately, don't understand strength and conditioning principles enough, and they don't load the ankle joint specifically enough, knowing that the soleus does 60% of the work when you run, right? Or when you look at ground reaction forces and the eccentric loading on the Achilles when you tumble, it's monstrous, like astronomically higher than you would ever do just in jogging. So I think a lot of things that need to happen are seated calf raises off a deficit, standing calf raises, standing tiptoe walks, all with a lot of weight, right? With weight in their hands, because gymnasts are notorious for doing a lot of body weight stuff, but 15 times your body weight is real load on the floor and landing. So seated calf raises, standing calf raises with load in their hand, tiptoe walks with dumbbells in their hands, wall leaning shin lifts, like really directly strengthening the ankle. That gives you the raw strength to become power down the road, but it also restores the joint's capacity to handle some of that load. So that's kind of step two. After that, I'm a big fan of making sure that all gymnasts do general plyometrics first before they ever tumble or do really hardcore springboard work. So they should be able to do single leg deer hops and weighted pogo hops and repeated bounds, all on the spring floor, just over time with lots of volume over a course of a week, and not have a flare up, right? If you put someone in too fast and you're doing a bunch of jumps or runs, and then the next day they wake up and their ankle is sore, you're kind of pushing that threshold too much. Some of that will happen as they get back to it. But if someone doesn't have basic mobility, basic strength, and the basic tolerance of just plyometrics on the spring floor, what do you think is going to happen when they do a yurchenko? What do you think is going to happen when they do a double back for the first time and tumble really hard into the entry? So those three things are first. And then after that, you would just kind of go back up through the progression of basics and skills that you would do normally with an athlete, right? Whether it would be round off rebounds, whether it's back handspring rebounds, snap down back handsprings. For other elite athletes, you're working through really high double back timers. Maybe you're doing some layouts into the pit. You're just trying to slowly build up over time. And so I would say that's the progression I use. With that being said, I would really expand your expectation of timelines, right? So it's probably going to be multiple weeks, not multiple sessions, that someone is going to rebuild that up. Because if we load somebody 3 times per week, we know that collagen remodels about every 24 to 48 hours. We know that joint soft tissue stuff remodels every 24 to 48 hours. So we need to give somebody time in between those loading bouts to actually get stronger and heal back that way. So that would be my recommendation to summarize: is baseline mobility, baseline strength, baseline plyometrics, regular before gym, and then slowly working your way back up through technical progressions at whatever level it's at, and just expand maybe 2 to 3 times per week over the course of 2 to 4 weeks, maybe 200 or so ground contacts. That'd be my kind of over the counter soft, recommendation. So yeah, hopefully that is helpful. Okay, so we are going to, no problem. Glad that helped. Third giveaway here. Sorry, I should have texted Becky, but I was answering a question. So Beck, if you want to run the number for this one, is a free shift course. So you can get the flexibility course, the power course. If you're a medical provider, you can get any one of our medical courses. You can get the shift symposium, which is super popular. So Becky, if you want to run a number and just drop that to me, I will introduce the next question before we go into it. So the next one I want to do is going to be based on change. So I think this is a really good one to have us each kind of riff on. Is going to be kind of came from the chat. I forget who asked it, but I'll say the question. I'll let the panel kind of gather their thoughts, and then we'll do the giveaway so we can kind of do it. And we'll kind of go in order of the people who have answered to give time. So Lindsay, Victoria, Pat, and then Nick. We'll kind of go in that order. But okay, so someone said, I'm struggling with change. Who isn't, right? All of us are really riding that bus hard this year in gymnastics in the last few. Older coaches are not open to new drills or ideas. How do I encourage change without stepping on anyone's toes? And I think we can kind of context this in maybe coaching dynamics, but we can also maybe just order this in broad change. Like the sport is going through a blisteringly fast change in the last 5 years, particularly. We have sports psychology, we have gymnasts starting to lift, we have culture change, we have staffing changes, we have all sorts of different dynamics that are working on. So anybody can offer in the panel, their approach or their insight, whether it's more on the coaching front, whether it's the culture front, whether it's personal or working with staff. But yeah, we'll go Lindsay, Victoria, Pat, Nick in a moment after we do the giveaway. So the giveaway for a shift course is Robert Waroff. I'm sorry if I butchered your name, but congratulations. You just won a free shift course. So whatever you would like, just email Taylor at shiftmovementscience.com. And yeah, you will happily be enrolled in that. So congratulations and thank you for being here live. So, all right, let's go back through the order here. So I guess, Lindsay, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on this whole change aspect?
So I've talked to a lot of people about this actually. And so I think the very first thing that you have to accept is that you can only change yourself. And I hear this a lot. The culture of my gym, that, you can only change yourself unless you own the gym club or you're the head coach. And that is a hard truth and a hard reality that you have to swallow before you even dive into this. So my biggest advice usually to young coaches is to find a culture that you already fit into. Find the right place for you. And sometimes that requires doing a lot of interviewing, but just like there's a gym that's right for every kid, there's a gym that's right for every coach. And putting yourself in a healthy environment is going to really go a long way to helping prevent burnout. I think most coaches are burnt out because they're in a constant state of like not getting along with their coworkers. And so that would be number one. And then from there, I bought this gym almost 10 years ago. Before that, I was a compulsory coach in the program and worked my way up to optional. And this gym has gone through a ton of cultural change. And I recall being very, very, very frustrated in the early 2000s of what I was seeing and what I was feeling. And I was told pretty much, win my way first. When you can win the way that I want you to, then I'm open to hearing your opinion. And so honestly, that's exactly what I did, because unfortunately we're a sport and there's a lot of power in winning. And so I did. And I would encourage people to do that, but I didn't do it their exact way. I did it a little bit my way. And then I was able to point out all of the things that I did that I thought were better from a cultural perspective, not necessarily a technique perspective, from a cultural perspective that got my team to be successful. So if you're fighting this battle and your kids are coming in last, you're going to have a really hard time getting anyone to listen to you because there's no proof in your pudding. And so while these are really, really hard things, that's kind of where I come from. That is what works for me. And then slowly, when you're coaching in a certain way that you feel comfortable with and your kids are having fun and they're smiling and they're coming in the gym excited, other people will notice that. And unless they're completely just vacant and don't want to be a part of fun and happiness, they're going to start to change. And if they don't want to be a part of fun and happiness, I would just simply leave the gym. And I hear all sorts of reasons why people can't. And quite frankly, we don't lie, we don't cheat, we don't steal, we don't make excuses. Don't come to me with an excuse. Open your own gym if you can't move. So I think those are some hard truths, but that's kind of my perspective. But number one is always look to yourself first.
I absolutely love that. I absolutely love that. That's so fantastic. Yeah. And I mean, who doesn't want to have fun, right? Who doesn't want to be in Pat's LSIT station? Come on now. I want to be there. All right, let's go. Victoria next. What do you think on this?
Can you hear me? Yep. Okay. This is a hard one. I opened a gym in the middle of a town that already had two pretty large and very established gyms. So my gym has now existed for only 5.5 years, which is really not a long time in the scope of gyms, especially being surrounded by gyms that have been open for like 25 years. But they were just kind of doing something one way. And I really wanted to do it a different way. And it's kind of like Lindsay said, like, how the fact that like if your kids are losing and you're doing terribly, then you're not going to convince anybody to switch to your ways. And so I think it was a journey, because I opened a brand new gym it was like 3,000 square feet at first, surrounded by these huge gyms. And I was like, okay, I'm going to stick to my guns. I know that this works. I came from a totally different area, moved here. I was like, I know that this works, and I'm just going to grind for years until I start developing a program I can prove to people that it works. And so now I'm doing these YouTube live videos where I'm coaching my compulsory groups, which are pretty large compulsory groups, completely live, no secrets. And I'm showing people, here are my awesome, awesome compulsory girls. Look how strong they are. Look at their solid foundation. And I'm doing it being the nicest that I possibly can. I'm encouraging them. I'm loving them, and it's working. And so there's no secrets. I've got a camera on me. I've got a microphone on, and it's live. And I'm like, no secrets. We just come in here and we grind. Like, we literally, like, oh, that's all I'm doing. I'm sweating on live stream. I look terrible. I'm like dripping, and I'm like breathing. Okay. And then I'm spotting my kids. And then this is how I spot them. But that's it. You just have to prove to people. So if you are that want to change the culture of your gym, but you're just kind of in it. Like, again, like, it's easier for me because I own my gym. But again, I was coming in a town that had a totally different mindset about gymnastics, and I was like changing it for the town. And so as a gym owner, yeah, like, I could change the culture of my gym, but I had to convince everybody in my town that this was the way to do it. And it took years, and it's like finally setting in and finally happening. But it's just, you just have to prove to everybody. You've got to work your tail off. You've got to grind. You've got to get your kids to grind. You've got to get everybody that you can influence in that situation. So that anybody that you're leading, so that would be the children, right? You want them to get on board with it. You want to try to convince the parents to get on board with it. And then when when it is working, then you can say, hey, look, see, aha. And I think that's it. But oh my goodness, was it like, oh, so stressful and so difficult to do. Especially, I was 21 when I opened my gym, surrounded by, these people that have owned gyms for just years and years and years. And I got emails from them talking about how I was crazy and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm just going to keep working. And man, when I tell you that I was working, like, I was just working really, really hard. And I was like, I have to make this work. I have to make this work. And I think that's what it takes is, those people that are just going to really, really work, and then surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And if you're in a position to do that, if you're in a position to, like, if you're a hiring person, then you want to make sure that those interviews, what you're talking to them about is their views on coaching. Will they fit in with your culture? And I definitely, if you're someone that's in a hiring position, you talk to them about culture and you teach them how to coach. But you got to make sure you got people that are on board with your mission. But that's all I got for that. It's tough, and good luck.
That's super helpful. And I'm glad you mentioned the point about when you were 21 opening your gym, because I think a lot of people are in that's what they feel, right? They're like, maybe they're listening to podcasts, they're going to courses, they're listening to Nick, right? They're doing stuff and they're trying to implement change. And maybe the person is, whatever age is, whatever, just like that person's just not into it, right? So I'm glad you said that, which is kind of like, sticking to your guns, and maybe combining with Lindsay too, which is like work on yourself and try to like tunnel vision a little bit, because, you're not going to make anyone do anything. You know what I mean? All right, cool. Let's go, Mr. Patrick.
I think a lot of the good things have already been said, but for me, actually, I have Lindsay's suggestion of like, look, if you're not in an environment where you feel like you're meshing with the culture and you can't make change, move. That's something that I've actually just recently experienced. So I've moved up to Queensland. I've changed states about 2 years ago now. And I love my last club. I was there for 10 years as a coach. I learned tons as a coach there, and I really love and respect all the people down there still. I go back and visit anytime I'm in that area. But in saying that, while I was working there, there was I was under a head coach, and just the philosophies around sitting and certain approaches to physical preparation and stuff like that just wasn't quite the same between us. And getting my younger athletes, originally they very bought into my vision of like, hey, don't sit, let's grind, let's work, let's go, let's hustle. But I was finding it hard to maintain that as they got older, when the senior athletes at the club didn't have that same work ethic. They weren't really, they weren't leading by example, in my opinion. And again, it's just my approach. Since moving to a new club where I could be the head coach of the MAG program, I've found a lot less friction. I straight away I can get the athletes to work the way I want them to work. And because the older athletes have bought into it, the younger athletes are continuing to develop really well. So I agree that sometimes you just got to change, and you got to find an environment where you maybe have more of a say, or you've got people that are following that. The other thing I'll just mention though, as well, is I think some young coaches, feel like, the older people need to change. And I'm not so much talking about strictness here, like negative coaching culture, slightly differently to that, just like approach to skill development and stuff. There's old school methods and new school methods and that kind of stuff. I do think that some young coaches can have an opinion, but also need to respect the opinions of these people that have been around the sport for a long time. And you can, like myself, for instance, I'm super unproven still. Like I'm still, like, I've had some great compulsory boys and stuff, but I haven't had the chance to build all the way through to level 10s. So while I have some really strong ideas and opinions about how I'm going to develop those athletes now so they're amazing level 10s, it's unproven. So I'm not going to go there and say that what other coaches are doing is wrong until I've gone through that and I've actually got some results and I can show, yes, this is the process I did, and you can see why it's worked. Until I can do that, it's just an opinion, and you really can't put other people's point of views down too much.
I love that, man. Thank you so much. All right, we'll do Nick, and then I have a couple thoughts, and we'll do our last giveaway, and then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah, I think I'm in a difficult position here because everyone's spoken so brilliantly that, there's not much really left to say, is there? Thanks, Dave. I appreciate that.
I think you're up to the challenge.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, let me just look at this, not from a different perspective, but maybe let's discuss maybe a different angle on this. I think Lindsay smashed it at the start, basically saying that you just can't change other people. And I've been on that journey myself of being a very non-self-aware coach when I first started out, thinking that I was the one doing everything right and all these experienced coaches around me were doing things wrong. And that can be quite a wake-up call when you start to shift your levels of awareness and understand that actually you're the one that hasn't really got a clue what they're talking about, and you've got to do some sort of internal work there. So I think Pat's kind of echoing the same message here, which is when you're surrounded by people with experience, respect their experience. And that's not to say that you just throw out your ideas and your passion and you just only conform to the message that other people are sharing, but there is a barrier, there's a threshold of how much you can intervene and make changes. So I think you just got to respect that. It doesn't matter if you're a young coach or an older coach. I guess it's if you are self-aware or new to coaching, just kind of respect the role that experience plays. But let's look at this a little bit different. Let's say that you do want to influence, is probably the right word here. If you do want to influence the people around you, there are some ways of being able to do that. There's a method which is called like nudging. So basically, essentially, you might leave a book in the staff room and someone might pick up that book and just be sort of intrigued by it. Now, that might be a really subtle way of just catching someone's attention. You might have a work, like a WhatsApp group, a Facebook group that you share with your staff. And you might just find a resource, like it might be one of your episodes of your, one of your 200 episodes of your podcast, Dave, that a member of staff listens to, and they think actually has a really valid point in there. And, I want to try and influence, Dave's message within our gym. So you might just simply drop that link in the chat and just say, oh, I've just listened to this great episode. Let me know what you all think. Now, that's a very different message to saying to everyone, I think we should do this and we're doing it wrong. And, Dave says this and therefore we're not doing it right. It's a more subtle kind of nudge towards the direction of have a listen and maybe let's chat about how we all feel about it. It could be that you all read the same chapter of a book and then you get together and just share your thoughts about, what were the reflections that you had, what were the messages that were important in the book, and how can you as a club learn from that and perhaps improve your own program. So you're instead of telling people what to do, you're kind of saying, check this out. Is this going to be interesting? Let me know what you think. Why don't we all talk about it and share our ideas at a later date? So that could be just really facilitating discussion rather than trying to tell people the direction to go in. And I think that's what's important, because essentially we're talking about psychological safety. If you approach an experienced coach, an older coach, whatever they are, and basically say you're doing it wrong, you're threatening their feeling of psychological safety and security, which isn't pleasant for anybody. Instead, by saying, I've read this great book and I think it would be great if we all read it and shared our thoughts on it, that's not as threatening. It's just a nudge in the right direction. So maybe that's something that, for coaches to think about. And ultimately, I think Lindsay had mentioned this, like let your results show. So if you have a philosophy that you're able to introduce to your own environment and your own coaching, go for it. If it works, it works. And maybe the influence will actually be that other people will see the success of those methods and they'll start to adopt them themselves. That is the long game, but that might be what you need to do in order to prove the philosophies and the principles that you're talking about or thinking of.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate that. That's a great way to kind of end things here. And I can share my quick little thoughts, and then, we'll do the last giveaway and just kind of wrap things up. But yeah, I think something I can kind of see across all of these, people who are on the guest panel, because obviously we've had podcasts and we're friends and we've chatted a lot. And also something that I hope that we reflected in the podcast episodes are a couple of things. One is that I've had a lot of experiences where younger me would do what Nick said, kick the door and kind of like tell when they're doing it wrong. And I just completely had to eat my words because I was never going to get that message across well, but also I really didn't have the experience to do that. But now what I've done, and what I think I see a lot in these people who are talking here, is that the ability to, be accountable. And, what I mean by that is be accountable in what you're doing for your own life choices, secure in your morals, your ethics, your values, independent of gymnastics, or if the kids are doing well or not doing well, or if the gym is winning and if the gym is not. That is something that I feel like I see in so many high-level coaches that I respect a lot, is they are really good people by themselves, and they happen to bring that to gymnastics. They don't need everybody else to clap for them and say they're amazing and do that. They really are great people who generally have a wonderful life, and they're doing gymnastics because they love it and they want to help out. So I would say that's where you have to first start, is the accountability to change things. If your life is maybe, needs some adjustment, whether it's lifestyle or whatever, and really being secure in yourself as a human outside of gymnastics. Now, beyond that is you have to just straight up accept the fact, like, of what everyone said. You can't change people, and you can only focus on yourself, right? And Nick and I have had some conversations where, I'm fortunate that now I'm working with some national bodies and some really I guess you would consider high-level coaches. And I just have to accept the fact that maybe a third of them, they generally don't care what I think. Like, as much as I think that I maybe know some stuff and I've had some experience and whatever, you couldn't do anything to possibly change these people's minds. And it's just because what they have done for 40 years has been the way they know things. And that's okay. So versus me being like, I can't believe these 8 people have zero ideas and don't want to listen up. But there also are 17 people over here who generally do understand. Maybe there's some things I can offer them, and maybe there's some things that are helpful to learn. And so I focus on those people, right? Like, okay, well, I respect your decision to move on. It's okay. We have a difference of opinion, but I was asked to come here and share my thoughts. And so that's what I'm going to do. And I'm secure in myself. And I like to think that what I'm talking about is high quality and evidence-based. So I'm going to stick to that, and that's okay. We just agree to disagree, and you can maturely, civilly do that with people, right? I'm not working with these people in the gym, so I don't have to obviously stay with them day to day, but I just say, okay, I respect your opinion, and I'm going to go a different direction. So that's the second piece, is acceptance there. And third is, I cannot understress how much you have to actually do the work. Like, everybody in the podcast that I respect as guests, they are working in the trenches to do what they say is important, right? So I'd like to think I work very hard and have a lot of value behind my information, but I know for a fact everyone here is working their tail off to try to deliver high quality information and work really hard to support their kids. So everybody will, people can ignore what you say, but nobody can ignore what you do. You know what I mean? I've talked about notoriously on the podcast how me on the ground dying after doing sled pushes with our athletes in conditioning is one of the best culture builders that I've ever done. There's no amount of exercises or things that I've done that just is just me in the dirt doing the work with those people. And I think that same thing goes for coaches, right? When you have other coaches who see you coming in early to read, and see you listening to podcasts, and see you trying new drills, and see you going to Congress, and they see you actively working to be better, it's really easy for them to kind of be interested in what you want to do and kind of do that. And I just think that those things are maybe my summaries of a lot of conversations with people on the podcast, but also what I hope that we reflect in the podcast. It's just those principles of taking care of yourself and doing accountability. But I wish Eva was here, because she would say this so eloquently, as Lindsay did, which is like, if you don't like what you're doing in your job and you're not happy, then move. Change gyms. Like, it's not worth your mental health and your physical health to be miserable. And yeah, that takes work. It takes work to save your money and move to a gym or find another place to go. It's not easy, right? It is not easy to change your lifestyle, to change who you are, to change your gym, to change your career. But would you rather slowly trudge through 10 more years of a miserable career, or move somewhere and be happy? Like that. There are plenty of people out there who are wonderful in their gyms doing the greatest thing ever. And if you love coaching and you love being involved, then it's worth it to yourself to put in the work to find a place that you really enjoy. So that is kind of my last 2 cents and my parting monologue, I guess. But all right. So last giveaway here, which Becky, did you put my name in the giveaway? Because I was wondering if maybe I could win Nick's Growth Academy for a year. The winner is Megan Kadetsky. I'm sorry if I just butchered your name also over there, but congratulations to Megan, who just won an epic prize there. And thank you to Nick for offering that up. But Nick, where should they go for that? Would email you or reach out or DM or?
DMs. Yeah, DMs are good. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, Instagram.
Cool.
We'll go from there. That's brilliant. That's looking forward to having her in the academy. So.
Megan Weary. I'm sorry, it was the wrong Megan. My fault. Okay. So somehow Dave never gets this right, but we're perfectly on 5:30 Eastern time. So again, from the bottom of my heart, I just want to say thank you to everyone because 200 episodes is ridiculous. I love this part of the job. I love the conversations. I love the podcast. I love selfishly learning from people. And it's not going to happen if people don't listen to it. So thank you to everyone who has listened for 200 episodes. Thank you to our guests who come on all the time. Actually, when this comes out, it'll be backwards, but the next 5 podcasts are insane. So I'm really excited for some of the podcasts coming out leading up to 200. So I hope everyone enjoys that. But again, only because people listen and we have awesome guests, that way it kind of snowballs and we get more cool people on the podcast. So yes, if you're listening to this in the recording, I hope you enjoyed it. And please let us know what you enjoyed the most, whether DM or Twitter or whatever else it should be. We would love to hear from you and get more feedback. So cheers to 200 and hopefully on to 300.
Thanks,
Dave. Well done.
Appreciate it.